Okay, where are we at? Week 4, circuits 3 and 7. So, conceptual intelligence and mythopoetic intelligence, given the Antero descriptors here. And again, if we'll go back to my Jungian frame of reference of separation, in the first circuit, first dimension, we separate from the creator, our mother. In the second dimension, we separate from the mother. The infant separates from the creator by being born. And then the toddler separates from the mother by gaining mobility through crawling and walking and toddles away, says no, creating that separation of what's me and what's not me versus the infant that doesn't really have that distinction, just basically sees the world. And then the toddler sees there's me and the world. And we move into the preschooler, and our Jungian separation here gets a little weird. What he calls the separation of the world parents. So again, if you just imagine the infant is just kind of seeing the world with no sense of identity, and then the toddler goes into the me not me phase. The preschooler sort of sees the world complexify instead of just is the world okay and am I okay. Now it's like, what is the world? Oh, it begins to take on shape and form. So it starts with duality, the separation of the world parents. And so what do I want to say about that? Yeah, so it starts with duality, the separation of the world parents, and that initial polarity complexifies into symbols and patterns, and that these polarities complexify from symbols and patterns into language and concepts. And so this is where we get the idea of conceptual intelligence, because this third dimension is about concepts. And there's a lot to explore here about the inherent bias of language and how we're just not even aware of it because it's so innate. Only people that speak multiple languages typically become aware of how how they show up could shift just by what language they're using and how that shapes their world. But really, just to kind of get into the realm of the human psyche that I want to explore, to me, this is the stage of self concept, of kind of how I understand myself as well as the world. But I want to stick with this idea of self concept. And to put it another way, um, what is it I don't fit into my self concept? So let's say I've convinced myself I'm not an angry guy. I just won't allow myself to be angry. It's part of me that I just like, no, I'm not an angry man. I'm a peaceful man. Well, I've totally denied whatever anger I have in myself because we all have these inherent qualities in us. They come and go as emotions, but if we just sort of exercise that, cut it out and say that's not a part of me. That's what we can refer to as a shadow. And I refuse to examine or accept this anger inside of me. And so what happens as a consequence is I project that anger onto other people. Typically, you can spot that with a judgment, like he's so angry, or that's just an angry person. There's not just an assessment of the person having some anger, but also a judgment around that. Um, Usually, and yeah, a judgment around it. So what I'm saying here is that with this self concept, there's parts of us that form the shadows that we don't recognize as part of our fullness as a living, breathing human. And what we don't recognize, we project. And so we don't recognize the concept of anger within ourselves, and then we project that concept onto other people. That's what I'm getting at, I guess, to link it to the conceptual. And so to me, a part of my third dimension health is to identify these projections and learn to integrate them within my being. Um, so to the extent that I could start to identify with somebody else's anger, I identify with that anger within myself. I start to identify with my own anger and understand where it comes from and what causes it. I can then become more empathetic and compassionate towards people that I see anger in, right? I can empathize with your anger. And through empathizing with you and your anger, because I've learned to come to terms with my own anger, I feel more connected to you. And I believe that's the core of the seventh dimension, um, is feeling connected to other people, to the planet, to the cosmos. Um, and within that, there's all these archetypes of Gaia, Mother Earth, and Father Son, and all the Jungian archetypes that we've been using terms like warrior, lover, magician. We'll talk about in a minute here. Um, these conceptual things that are much bigger than just us as individuals, and that can identify through the human race as a whole, or so on and so forth. Um, so that to me is the seventh dimension, this sense of connectedness. So where the heck am I? So to get to that though, that seventh circuit, we have to break our conceptual limitations, what I'll call constrictions of the left hemisphere. And that's probably a story for another day. So what are some ways to do this? Mindfulness meditation, just sitting and meditating. After a while, you let go of your thoughts. You're not getting rid of your thoughts, you're just letting go of them. And you're not identifying so fully and completely as you develop your sitting practice. And then from there, you slide into a more direct, felt sense experience of the world, which is something we talked about with the second and sixth dimensions. So meditation is a way to sort of shed this conceptual language, our monkey mind thoughts that are always going on, and let go of them so we don't identify with them. And when we do that, we allow ourselves to perceive without these frameworks and biases. Low dose psychedelics, same thing, tends to dissolve these conceptual frameworks and biases and allow you to touch into more of that sixth dimensional perception. So it's like you have to shed this third dimension to really deepen into the second, sixth stuff that we talked about last week. Another exercise that really blew my mind was the practice of writing E prime. And that's simply the matter of using English without the verb to be. So is, are, was, were, be, been, became. You cut that out of your writing. And it takes a hell of a lot of effort to do that. It can be a real pain in the butt. Basically, I experimented. I was heavily posting in Robert Anton Wilson forums roughly 20 years ago. And I really made it like, I think about a 2-year practice of posting in E prime and writing in E prime. And it took a while and you learn little tricks and things, but the net result is it completely shifted my perceptions to where I felt like what I perceived is what everyone perceived. Completely shattered that and reinforced this sort of psychedelic idea that we all perceive our own little world. So again, not to belabor that, or maybe it's too late, but E prime is a tool to really break that rigid conceptual framework that we tend to put on ourselves and create a more expansive framework. And we do that, so when we dissolve these conceptual frameworks, we create an opening to create new ones. It's often referred to in these parts as meta programming. When we dissolve our third dimensional rigidity It allows us to move up into the sixth dimension of felt sense, innate wisdom, even some seventh circuit connectivity and unity with the world, with the world around us. And from that place, we create some conceptual frameworks that reflect our newfound authentic understanding. And to go back to our archetypes, so we could call this the magician, the preschooler being the magician, that the preschooler is learning how fine motor skills, language, conceptual intelligence, and that's magic, really. I mean, how we use language to solve problems and symbolic math, and just creating symbolic representations of the world in order to solve the problems, to yeah, to just understand and navigate the world and problem solve. That's the magician. And maybe the meta magician is then when we learn to break those frameworks down that have complexified and sort of crystallized through childhood, and break them down and become even more skilled at how to use them. I'll call that the meta magician. Just made that up. Anyway, so to me, I'm talking about the third circuit, conceptual intelligence. It's language, it's symbolism, but it's also how we conceive of ourselves, and how, to the extent we don't identify with a certain archetype, we'll project that onto somebody else, and we can then reclaim that. And through reclaiming that, we feel more connected to other people, which leads us into this seventh dimension, which is connectivity in a way. Again, sort of like moving from fifth dimension, fifth circuit, unity with the body, sixth dimension, unity with the nervous system and the energetic body, seventh dimension, unifying with the world around us. Another way to put this, Antero would talk about the vertical versus the horizontal. So that the vertical is the world. No, that's the horizontal is the world around us, the mundane. The vertical is this sense of connectedness with something deeper, and that's that, to me, the seventh circuit unity with the cosmos, so to speak. Vertical sources, as Antero liked to refer to them. How can you tap into your vertical sources? So again, if the third dimension starts off with polarity, the separation of the world parents, the first polarity, the first duality, then we flip that to the seventh dimension. That's really unity with the world. And almost as we can start to see ourselves as a single jewel in Indra's net of jewels that are all reflecting back on each other. The common frames. We are all one consciousness. As a side note, I feel like that's just so overdone. Like that's the main objective these days, is one consciousness. And to me, it's like, yeah, it's one of our 8 dimensions. It's an important one, but there's steps along the way and so much more richness. I digress. So again, if we look at the Korzybski phrase, the map is not the territory. Conceptual intelligence is all about making maps. And then seventh dimension, mythopoetic intelligence is about shedding those maps and relating as a connected part of the cosmos, relating to the cosmos. Maybe that's another way to put it. Experiencing this realm of the mythopoetic. While I'm just throwing stuff out there, I'll put it another way. There's a talk about flow states. One way to think of it, to me, is that if you are connected to your energetic body, your 6th dimension, your physical body, your 5th dimension, and then your 7th dimension, the connectedness to the world around you, when you've got those three connections firing, that to me is where you can be in a flow state. I've rambled enough. I don't think there's any real experiential meditation to go with this at the moment. And yeah, we're going to leave it at that. Thanks for listening.